Hello all and welcome to part 2. I listened to my part 1 narration and realised how boring it was. Unfortunately, this one's not going to be any better. Due to the slope of the yard, I decided that the easiest way to level the structure would be to place 2 Besser blocks at either end of the foot and then level across the bricks. The process took a lot of trial and error, moving the bricks in and out of the holes. However, it turned out to be fairly easy despite all the adjustments. Once the blocks were level, I took some dirt from the pile and filled it back in around the blocks. I used as much of the dirt as I could and I tamped it in really tightly around the blocks and inside the blocks as well. That should be more than enough to keep them in place over time. In order to ensure that the second post was in the right place in relation to the first post, I had to level across the 2 legs first. I then followed the same procedure that I did with the first post and levelled along the length of the leg. I then moved the second post into place. Next I took the galvanised pipe and affixed one of the floor flanges to one end. Because the pipe is threaded, it's just a matter of screwing it on there. I fed the bar through the holes in the top of the post and then screwed it into place using 8 long screws, 4 through each of the floor flanges. After screwing the bar into place, I checked that it was level. It was very slightly off, but only by a tiny bit, so it was close enough. I measured the exact distance between the posts at the top where the bar was attached, and then attached 2 pieces of wood at the bottom of the legs to make sure that it stayed in place until I was able to concrete it. I got my trusty angle grinder and cut the excess length off the bolts at the bottom of the posts. I then spot welded them in place to make sure they wouldn't rattle loose over time. I also decided to spot weld the bar to the floor flanges at the top of the structure because they didn't screw in very far, seeing as they were going into the backside of the floor flanges and they only wanted to screw in there about 2mm each. I used a strap and a clamp to pull the posts slightly to the left to make sure they were perfectly level. Then I started mixing concrete and pouring it into the post holes. I decided to use a regular concrete mix rather than a quickset concrete because I wasn't quite sure how many bags I was going to need to do the entire job, and I didn't want to run out of bags halfway through a post, only to have one lot set before I was able to get a second lot in there. I bought 6 bags of concrete, and as it turned out I needed 8 in the end, 3 for the post on the right and 5 for the post on the left. I agitated the mix to get all the air bubbles out once it was in the hole. Then I rounded it off at the top to make sure water wouldn't be able to pool on top of the concrete. The next day I took some of the excess dirt and filled in around the feet where I hadn't concreted. I packed the dirt in and then I took some of the grass that I'd originally cut out and used that to place back in the holes as well. The next step was to make the 45-degree angle braces to go from the legs to the upright posts, just to add a bit of forwards and backwards strength. I made 2 out of 100 by 100 treated pine and 2 out of 35 by 90 structural pine, which is what I had laying around. I used a few pieces of scrap ply that I had to make 8 brackets. These brackets don't serve any major purpose, but they're a good way of holding the 45-degree braces in place and potentially adding a little bit of strength to what would otherwise just be held in place by a few screws. I placed the braces in position where they needed to be, and then screwed the brackets hard up against either end to make sure it wouldn't be able to move out of place. I painted the cut ends and the undersides of the 45-degree braces with 2 coats of the in-ground timber protector. Once they were dry, I hammered them into place and then fixed them in position with a number of screws. Finally, I painted the last few edges of exposed wood. Then it was just a matter of playing the waiting game until the concrete had set fully.